Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're talking about how to beat Branded Despia. This is clearly the best deck of the format right now, or one of them, for sure. So the question is, well, there's two questions, actually. The first question is, how do we zoom in? There we go. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. All right, so how to beat this deck, right? And I'm not going to be talking about all versions of Branded, because there are a lot. Odds are, if you're facing a version of Branded that's not Branded Despia, just hit the Predaplant Verite Anaconda, Ash it, Valor, Imperm, what have you. You should be fine. I know like Tri-Brigade Branded has seen some recent success. I know Invoked Branded feels like it should be good, but I haven't really seen it a lot. I know Springans Branded is an interaction because one of the fusion monsters says Springans. And so does one of the new cards for Branded. But we're just talking about Branded Despia because that appears to be the best version of Branded, right? And there are a lot of different interaction points that are going on and going to be happening. And what's great about this archetype is that they have big, scary fusion monsters, but they also have really strong effect monsters that are going to be able to just help mitigate any forms of disruption. So what we're going to talk about here in this video is what the deck is really trying to do, trying to accomplish, and how to counter it, right? So the first thing, what the deck is trying to do is, simply put, most cases, it's Mirror Jade, couple of hand traps, and set up Branded in red, right? So if you're able to stop the Branded in red or disrupt the Branded in red, you're going to be in a good spot, right? Because that really is their main interaction point. That's really their main play. Like, they obviously can do other things, right? But their main interaction point is using Mirror Jade's effect on itself, getting access to Branded in red, sending down the fusion monster that sets cards. I forget its name, but sending down the fusion monster that sets cards, right? Getting Branded in red, set onto the field, summoning out, getting the Mirror Jade back, summoning out Guardian Chimera, and based on how many cards they use in their hand, how many cards they use in the field, having interactions that way, right? Guardian Chimera is an absolutely fantastic card, and it works super well in this archetype. I mean, obviously you have like Comedy, Tragedy, Adlib of Despia, that they could do different things and have interaction points in their hand as well. But the main thing that this deck is trying to do is they're trying to disrupt your plays with Mirror Jade and disrupt your plays with Guardian Chimera. Now, interestingly enough, if Mirror Jade banishes itself, and you probably already know this interaction, but if you don't, I'm just going to explain it here and now. If it comes back the next turn, it can use its effect again, right? Because it's a different card that came to the field. So that's just interaction points you may have already known, but now you do know for sure, right? So that means that if they use, let's say they don't use any monsters on the field, at the very least they can still banish a card off Mirror Jade, right? And they're going to draw 3 cards. Like I said, that's usually what they're trying to do, is end on Mirror Jade, Chimera, and a couple of hand traps, or end on, there's a couple other fusion monsters that are forms of disruption that they like to run. This deck could also run Dragoon, because there's just a bunch of dragon monsters in this deck. And so they send down the one of the Hex Seals, one of the fusion substitute cards. Usually it is the light Hex Seal, just because the the branded fusion monster that requires Fallen of Albas and a light monster is one of the better ones. But honestly, they're just using the fusion substitute so they can get out Dragoon. Dragoon is still a fantastic card, right? So that's the other really big thing you gotta worry about, to be honest, is that Red Eyes Dragoon, because the deck can do that as well. Predaplant Verite Anaconda is fantastic in this deck, and there's just a lot of interaction points. What's great about this deck, it's similar to Sword Soul, and what I mean by that is if we look at like Dragon Link, Phantom Knights, we see decks that are very good at putting out these crazy boards. And we're just like, okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, even like Tri-Brigade, right? 4 different monsters with interaction points. Also, you have a couple of set cards, right? Also, you have like 2 or 3 cards in your hand. That's not really what Despia is trying to do. Like I said, it's similar to Sword Soul in the sense that it's trying to win the card advantage game. It's trying to disrupt you just enough to where they can get to turn 3, and they're going to kill you in turn 3, right? Some Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are trying to kill you in turn 1. Some Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are trying to kill you in turn 2. And then there's a lot of really good Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks that are trying to kill you in turn 3. And what I mean by that is just what I was talking about when it comes to Branded Fusion, or the Branded Despia Fusion deck, right? Where it's like, no, it's not the scariest looking board ever. If you brick, or if you don't open super well, still might end up getting disrupted, still might end up losing. But what they're really trying to do is they're trying to disrupt you just enough to where even if you break their board, it's going to take your entire hand to do so. You're going to have literally no follow-up, and they're going to have a bunch of follow-up, right? It's almost like taking some damage to dish even more damage. That's the type of thing that they're trying to do. So that brings up one of my first spots. Like I already mentioned, stop the Branded in Red. You're going to be in a good spot. Stop the Branded in Red summon, stop the Branded in Red interaction. However you can stop Branded in Red, stop Branded in Red. But another spot is going second against this deck. Kill them as soon as you can. Kill them as, I mean, and obviously that goes for every deck, but it goes more for decks like this. When your opponent ends on kind of a smaller board, right? Let's just say this. If you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you're playing against a good tier 1 deck, right? So these are like, you know, the final rounds of your local. These are like rounds 4 or 5 of just about any Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament. You're probably going to be facing a good meta deck. If they have more cards in their hand than on the field, you're going to want to kill them as soon as possible because they're playing the long game. They're not playing the OTK, FTK, Unbreakable board game. They're playing the go ahead and break my board. I'm going to take all of your cards with me, and then by the time I'm done, because remember, Mirror Jade, when it's destroyed or when it leaves the field, it destroys all monsters in the end phase, right? So if you didn't already have enough incentive to kill them going second against this deck, there's incentive right there. So what cards could specifically counter this deck is an interesting thought process, right? So it's like, what cards should I be running in my side or my main deck? Impermanence is great. Ash Blossom is great. Don't have to really talk too much about that. Ghost Ogre could actually be very solid against the strategy if you time it correctly and hit the right monster. But just keep in mind, Mirror Jade does have that destruction effect, and it doesn't activate immediately to where you could play around it, right? And I think that's why that card has that. Like on the one hand, you look at it like, man, I wish that would activate immediately, right? But you could play around it if it activated immediately. And what I mean by that is, let's say your opponent's got a Mirror Jade on the board. You activate Smashing Ground. You destroy it. It destroys all monsters you control. You don't have any monsters on the field, right? But let's say your opponent has a Mirror Jade. You activate Smashing Ground. Now, any monsters you summon for the rest of the turn might get destroyed in the end phase. So that's actually an interesting interaction point. So like I said, be careful with the Ghost Ogre, but Ghost Ogre can be very solid against this deck as well. I was actually talking about this card to good length at my Market Watch on Sunday. DD Crow has a very good interaction point, but you have to. It's just with a deck that's this consistent, you have to find. You have to just. You're never going to find the perfect spot. You're never going to be like, oh, if when I play Ash here, they just lose. When I play, I mean, there might be situations. There might be situations where they just hard brick and they drop the Branded Fusion and hope it resolves so they can do their plays. You play Ash Blossom and you just win. There might be situations like that, but I feel like they'll be few and far between. Odds are, because that's what this deck does. This deck isn't a big on like it's not like Virtual World, which is like if it draws the right hand, it just blows up. It's not like that. If this deck draws its best hand, it's still probably going to have more cards in their hand than on the field. So don't, I mean, like, yes, be smart with your hand traps, but don't hold back waiting for the right moment because you might just not ever see it, right? And going second, because that's what we're talking about right here. Because going first, I mean, come on, we know what to do going first, right? Just like set up a good board and set up a couple Omni Negates, summon an Apollo. Apollo's is fantastic against this deck, by the way. A Solemn Warning, Solemn Strike, Solemn Judgment. We know what to do going first, right? But going second, obviously Dark Ruin no more, Droplets, even Lightning Storm, Regeki, Dark Hole. those are going to get you there. Those are going to get rid of the opponent's monsters. But you have to time. You have to time them right? Because if they haven't, because that Guardian Chimera, it's kind of like Dark Magician. You know how Dark Magician or Christian, like they'll wait for you to do something to start playing during your turn. That's how this deck likes to play. This deck really likes to drop. They don't drop the Branded Red immediately. They're not trying to scythe you during the standby phase. They're trying to wait for you to start developing your plays, and then drop the Guardian Chimera, pop 2 cards, draw a card. Or pop 1 card, draw 2 cards. Different interactions like that. So timing it appropriately is going to be very, very key. Off the hand, trying to think of any monsters or any cards that can really do it. You look at a card, I mean, like, look at a card like Night Beam. I know it's a meme, but it did see some play, I think at some point last year, to go against Tri-Brigade Revolt, because maybe this deck will set like Imperm Judgment, Branded Red, or maybe they just got Branded Red sitting there. And here's the thing too, when it comes down to Night Beam, they have to, the way they get access to Branded Red is they have to set it directly from deck. So it will be public information where the Branded Red is set. So you can Night Beam it. Obviously, there's Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twisters, MST. The difference, though, with those cards versus Night Beam is they can interact with that. Now, obviously, there's a way around Night Beam where if, let's say you Night Beam the Branded Red, they chain Infinite Impermanence on one of your monsters, and then they can chain Branded Red, right? Night Beam just says that they can't chain the card immediately to Night Beam, right? So just keep that in mind. But like I said, if you out the Branded Red, or if you could just do the Branded Red soon, if you could force the Branded Red out, that's really what you're trying to do against this deck. And going second, this card, there's cards that should feel kind of obvious, and I feel like they might start to make a comeback, at least in some way, shape, or form. It's Kaijus, right? Because unfortunately, the way Guardian Chimera works, it's because it's only 3 different monsters, so Kaijuing it may not work. But the way that their board is set up, it could out the Dragoon, right? So we out Dragoon, and then they summon Branded Red using the Kaiju. It's unfortunate, but at least we've got rid of the Dragoon, right? So Kaijus are terrible. Lava Golem's not terrible. Winged Dragon of Frost Sphere Mode's probably not going to work super well. I don't usually see their boards end with 3 or more monsters, which is why I don't think Nibiru is going to be super solid against this deck either. Like I said, you're just trying to bait out the Branded Red. Branded Red is such a key card. Maybe run Crossout Designator and side in the Branded Red. But that's going to be your biggest spot. It's Branded Red. That's why if you look at the penny stock market watches that have been dropping the last few weeks, ever since the Albi Strike Structure that came out, Branded Red has been the best selling card under $5, and it's because it's the best card in the deck. It's not the best card in the deck, but it's the best choke point in the deck. If you could stop the Branded Red, you're usually going to be in a good spot. But there's also the recovery, and like I said, this goes back to kind of like making them use their Branded Red before they want to. They are going to know, if they're a good player, they're going to know when the good spot is to activate Branded Red. So try to get them to use it too soon. If you can get them to use it too soon, play through that. You can start to recover and put them in a spot to where, yes, they're going to be able to interact with you going, third and trying to finish you off going third, like I was talking about earlier, but it won't be as smooth or easy as they would like it to be. And also keep in mind, too, that their main interaction point, the Guardian Chimera, is luck-based, right? Because it is a cards game. And when it comes down to card games, there is luck involved, right? So they drop the Guardian Chimera, even if they're drawing 3 cards somehow, and they're not popping any cards. It might be all bricks. It might be. They do run enough bricks to where they might not just draw like Ash, Droll, Veiler, right? They might not just draw those 3 cards. They might draw something completely different that ends up being in a bad spot. So keep that in mind going forward against this deck. And the biggest thing too, and this goes against like every deck that I've ever talked about as far as how to beat it. Don't be worried. Like they follow the same rules you do. Their deck is based off the same ban list your deck is based off of. They can only play 40 to 60 cards. You know, they're not playing 67 cards. They're not playing 30 cards. They're playing 40 to 60 cards, right? And so, and odds are your opponent's going to misplay. Your opponent's going to misplay. You know, there's so many different interaction points with this deck, and there's so many different moments to activate so many different effects. There's almost always guaranteed going to be a misplay. So just play it out, play through, do your best, forget the rest, and let me know what you guys think in those comments down below. What ways have you guys been beating Branded Despia? Let me know in those comments down below. Make sure you guys click that like button and check out some of the other videos like this. I know Eldritch, it's a little bit outdated, but it is still on this channel. You guys can check that out. But most importantly of all, have a good day.